Welcome to Happy Hour, a Scripts Gone Wild spinoff where we sit down with the folks who have helped make our reads happen. We shoot the shit for a little while and just see what happens. With us today is Mr. Kirk Thatcher, who has done basically everything you can possibly imagine. He's worked on Dinosaurs, The Curious Creations of Christine McConnell, The Muppets, Return of the Jedi, Gremlins. It's a very long, impressive, and super fun list. And
can we start by saying that you started with Dinosaurs and ended with Return of the Jedi?
Well,
you really buried Billy.
I probably watched Dinosaurs more as a kid than Return of the Jedi, so I think that's. So
yeah, because
this is Kirk's tiki mug for the drink that he chose for today. What drink was that you chose, sir?
It's a Honi Honi, which is essentially a Mai Tai. I love tiki culture and tiki drinks. I have a tiki room in my house. So it's my favorite tiki drink. It's basically a Mai Tai with bourbon instead of rum. So it's a little less sweet, has a little more bite to it. Depending on the bourbon, if you use like a rye heavy bourbon, it's kind of got that spicier, woodier thing. If you use a wheated corn or wheated bourbon, it's sweeter. So you can kind of moderate just because like you can with a Mai Tai. But I like it because I like bourbon. Not that I don't like rum, but it's a little less sweet. So
I used
it's just personal taste, I guess.
I used a new bourbon that I just bought. It's a Pinhook bourbon, and it's a rye. Well, the one I've got's a rye, and it's really great. It's really, really great. I'd never had.
I used Jameson, but I didn't have any of the mixers, so it's just Jameson.
All Dave ever drinks is
Jameson. I used Elijah Craig because it's a really smooth, Elijah Craig small batch, really smooth, doesn't have so much character that it would overwhelm the drink. Although with pineapple juice and lime juice in there, it's got a lot to fight. So, so here's to Elijah Craig.
Elijah Craig.
Here's to all the whiskey makers making whiskey.
That's right, especially right now when we need it the most.
Oh my God, I've been to Louisville, Kentucky a couple times, and if you like bourbon, man, it's like going to heaven.
Yeah.
It's like going to Napa if you like wine. It's just, I think I toured 7 distilleries in 2 days, and I could have done another 10. And then if you start driving, like 45 minutes an hour outside town, you could do another 10 or 15, and they're all good and interesting, and we learned a lot. It was fun.
I really want to go to Scotland and do the Scotch distillery tour.
Yes.
But what I've told my wife is I don't want to do it before we can afford to have a driver to just drive us around. Because
they do tours like in the various areas,
right.
Particularly the northern. I forget what it's called, but the northern part of Scotland. There's something like 80 distilleries within a 45-minute drive, and they just do tours. I mean, but they do like 4 or 5 a day, which is a lot. A friend of mine, her father, they're Scottish. Her father's on the Scottish board of distillers. So 2 years ago, the Muppets take the O2 in London. I was going to go and spend 10 days in Glasgow and Edinburgh and then do a bus tour and just get the royal treatment. And I got sick. I almost didn't make the Muppet. I know, because I booked it and I had to eat the cost. So I still have a standing invite. So, and I thought about this year, but I ain't going anywhere this year. So someday.
That's a good segue into your work, the Muppets. I mean, that's such an iconic. It's such an iconic franchise. What's it like to work in that world where, everybody, I don't care how old you are, has a story about that like they can relate to the Muppets.
Yeah, I mean, when I started, Jim Henson, I worked with Jim the last 5 years he was alive, and that was amazing. I mean, he started as a boss, quickly became friends, and just the way he ran the company. I mean, as an individual, stellar person, but the way he ran his creative company was just exemplary. I try and, I should give lectures on it because the way he treated people and the way he organized his company was so unique and rare, sadly. And the only other company I can think of that's like that, at least was Pixar. And Disney just keeps buying up these creative companies. And Disney has a much different culture. Even after Jim's passing, the family very much kept and respected the way he set it up. And, you know, but also in the last, I mean, since Jim passed away, which is jeepers, 30 years ago. Oh my gosh. Or 30, yeah, geez. There were much more independent companies. It's very hard to be an independent creative company now, unless you're really small, unless it's, you know, 2 people in an office or, you know, someone's garage. So just corporate culture has changed, and Disney's been buying up, obviously, the successful franchises that even Lucasfilm, when I started at ILM, my first job was at ILM, and that was less than 100 people. And George just kind of, I remember George was quoted as saying, and someone put it up on the wall, give these guys enough pizza and beer and they can create anything. But it was this very small kind of, and everyone wore a lot of hats, which again at Henson tended to be, I mean, you were either a puppeteer or a puppet builder, but Jim just sort of liked creative people around. Like my asking about how I got it, I had just finished Star Trek 4 and was friends with an effects producer who worked at Omnibus Able, and her ex-husband and the father of her children directed the first Muppet movie. His name was Jim Frawley. And so she said, I think, and I was pitching to her, I was just showing her ideas for shows with creatures and stuff. This was about 1986, 87, somewhere in there. And it was the year that Star Trek 4 came out. I never remember if I think we shot it in 85, it came out in 86, or we shot it in 86 and it came out in 87, something like that. Anyway, she said, you should meet him. I said, I would love to. So I met Jim and pitched him ideas, and then we just talked for a couple hours. We had lunch and then we just yacked away and just hit it off. And he said, I'd like to hire you. It's first as a consultant on projects. And then a year later, I moved to New York and started working with the company on the Jim Henson Hour as a sort of an idea guy, that was the thing about Jim. He would hire people to sort of just be a creative brain trust, as opposed to, I wasn't a writer and I wasn't a director. I guess technically I was a designer idea guy. So, I mean, it was the best job in the world to work with Jim Henson and sort of have free reign. And, you know, the way this is partly the culture he created. He never went, no, that's wrong, or that's not what I like. If, you know, because my idea was to spitball, like, here, come up with a bunch of characters. He said, he wanted to do a new band. He felt that the Electric Mayhem had gotten a bit long in the tooth. And Jim never stopped, not that he didn't like them, but he always wanted to do new stuff. And when technology came along, one of the things I worked on with him was the Waldo C graphic, which was the first computer real-time puppet. It was a puppet rig that worked a character like a video game character, but it was live, and the puppeteer would work it through a Waldo rig. So he was always exploring, and he was doing new things with puppets, all the stuff he learned from Dark Crystal Labyrinth. He was doing more foam latex puppets and seeing where the designs and more realistic eyes, not to the full extent of like Dark Crystal Labyrinth, but test pilot called Inner Tube TV. And the Jim Henson Hour was sort of a spin-off of some of the stuff he learned with that. Anyway, so I worked with him on that, and then I was consulting on the Muppet rides for Disney. Disney was going to buy the Muppets. This is around 1989, 90. I was working at Imagineering. I left New York, started working at Imagineering on a different ride, and then the Muppets were going to be bought, so I started doing some consulting on that stuff. And Jim and I started brainstorming Dinosaurs. And I did the first round of drawings and just chatting. So it's just he and I yakking away. And I'd sketch while we're talking, go off, do some renders, and then come back. And so we did our second round on a Friday afternoon. We had lunch, you know, shot the breeze, showed him the drawings. We talked about it, made some notes, said, you know, goodbye, have a good weekend. I was in New York for the weekend. I left on Monday, and I think he passed away or something crazy. I'd been home less than 24 hours, I think. And got the call, so I raced back, and sadly he had passed away, which was, I thought he'd been hit by a car. When you get a call at 6 a.m. and somebody you saw 4 days ago, they said he passed away. You're like, oh, was he in a car accident? Or, I mean, you didn't think it would be a medical issue.
Yeah.
Because I think he sniffled twice. So anyway, that was my experience with Jim. And then, you know, the family didn't want to sell the company to Disney, and Disney didn't want to pay them what they were. So the deal fell through, and the family ran it for about 11 years, I guess, until the early 2000s, about 2000, 2001, maybe 2002. And then they were bought by a German concern, and then that company went bankrupt, and then Disney bought them around 2003, and then Disney's been the owners and managers of the Muppets since then. And that's kind of the biggest, and it's not necessarily pejorative, it's just different. I mean, it feels less cozy. When a large corporation, where there are divisions, there's marketing, there's interactive, you know, and everybody kind of passed the Muppets around for a few years trying to figure out where the best fit was. And part of it too is Michael Eisner loved the Muppets and been trying to buy them, you know, 10 years earlier, 12 years earlier. And he finally got them, and then he left a year later. So we didn't really have a champion. So they really shifted us, I think, 5 times now, maybe 6. But we were at consumer products. We were at we had our own division for like a year and a half. Then it was consumer products for the kids division. Then it was live events for theme parks. Then it was the movie division for a bit, and then it was interactive, like digital interactive. And now we're under division of Imagineering. And they're actually great. The Imagineering people get character franchises because that's what they do. They support, you know, franchises in the park. So we just started. I mean, the only thing we've done so far is, I mean, that is a show. They've done some little interstitial bits. They just did Kermit singing Rainbow Connection, which was sweet. Is this new thing, Muppets Now, that's coming out this summer.
Wow. You also, I know Dave is going to have to pop off.
It's like a fire hose of information. Sorry.
No, that's great. I know Dave is an enormous Dinosaurs fan.
That show. It really, I mean, I don't know. That show hit me like, I'm 38 now. That show hit me like right at the right time in terms of like, it came around right when I was the target audience for Dinosaurs. I love that show. And also,
thank you.
That was like right in the midst of like me getting into sci-fi. Ironically, so I got into sci-fi with a film called Flight of the Navigator. Yeah, and then like that grew, and then Dinosaurs came right when I was like in a really formidable age. So I was like really into sci-fi, and like I don't know, Dinosaurs hit me hard. I love that.
I'm curious.
Well, yeah, it's funny to meet.
No,
go ahead. I was going to say, there's so many adults now with kids who are saying, "I love it. I've introduced my kids to it," and it's weird because you know, in my head, I'm still 28 years old making the. You know, nothing's changed that much. And to me, fully grown now that they're turning on to Dinosaurs is I mean, it's wonderful to know that, you know, I was involved in something that has that much staying power. And the thing that most people your age say was they loved it as a kid for the physical comedy and for the humor and the playfulness of it. And then as adults, they love it for all the subtext and what the shows were about, you know, whether
I think one of the thing where that really succeeded is the same way of like most shows that are geared towards children also have the adult subtext. But then this also had, on top of that, the really cool animatronics of doing puppetry. And so it was like, it was so many levels. Like I've enjoyed going back. They only did what, four seasons, if I'm not mistaken?
4 seasons. I think we did 63 unique episodes and 2 clip shows where it was a paleontologist kind of showing.
And it was like, I'll go back and revisit it and can appreciate it on a totally different level every time. And especially now as a filmmaker, when I go back and I'm just like, to actually create that, like now I'm just like in awe that existed, 30 years ago. Yeah,
it was kind of, it's funny. There's some law about every time a technology reaches its apex, something new sort of, you know, undercuts it and replaces it. And, you know, we made that the year Dinosaurs came out was the same year that Jurassic Park came out. And CG, you know, and so we kind of perfected, you know, because we were shooting 5-day weeks. I mean, with fully, you know, there wasn't an actor, it was all giant animatronic. costumes and puppets, and we got our downtimes down to like 5-10 minutes, you know, very small, and then nobody wanted to pay for it. Everything was like CG, and there's obviously CG is really good at a lot of things. But I still think there's a place, and you know, I'm not the only one to say it, but there's something about it, and the new Star Wars movies have kind of embraced that, the physicality of real creatures as opposed to everything being CG.
I will wholeheartedly, full-throated endorse practical effects with CG accompaniment, but practical first.
Well, what I think people don't realize is that even as much as CG has progressed over the last few decades, puppetry has progressed too.
Yeah.
It's not just this like.
Right. I mean, yeah. The creature technology, and also to me, I think the best is the best. It's the best of is the hybrid. It's like cars.
Yeah.
You get the best of both worlds. If you're going to drive 3,000 miles, it's great to have a gas engine. If you're going to just tool around town, never go over 50, 60 miles a day, an electric car is the answer, you know, and the hybrids can do both. I think CG is the same way. It's like you can make a great rubber, you know, physical creature, but if you actually want lip sync, it's great to add that in later. Because all the servos and everything to get the mouth and program it, they did it. Rick Baker's shop, amazing machine, or I guess you'd call it mechanical whiz, a guy named Mark Satrakian. Do you remember Gremlins 2?
Oh, yeah.
The brain gremlin that talked like Tony Randall. His lip sync was perfect, and they pre-recorded all his lines and then programmed it like a Disney figure, animatronic figure. But his lips actually moved. They were like, oh my, well, that's, you know, and it had all this programmed in a head, you know, the size of a submarine sandwich.
Yeah.
So it's today I probably would have done that as a puppet with maybe animatronic eyes and sort of crude mouth movements, and then do the sync, because you can just nail it perfectly. And that's what they're doing with animals now. You'll have a trained dog that kind of, you know, chewing peanut butter or something, but they'll put the lip, you know, it's just going and they put the
old Mr. Ed trick.
Yeah. So yeah, I think CG is great for some things. Like you couldn't do Jurassic Park with actual creatures, but they still use actual, you know, physical creatures for close-ups and where they interact with people. So I really think it's realistic dinosaurs. I mean, I'm not the first person to say that, but I think part of the issue is too that we're so trained. It's like that uncanny valley. With people, it's almost impossible to make a CG thing in a close-up. We're getting there though. It's pretty amazing. But with anything else, the physicality of it being there, it's so much work to make it look. When you see what these guys do with, you know, 17 different layers of reflection maps and environment maps and, you know, specular maps and subsurface scatter, all this just to make it look, and it's still, you're like, it looks fake. And you just made, you know, a silicone thing and then did the lip sync, or, you know, had it jump around in CG. It really is, I don't know, that's my opinion. And then everybody keeps their job.
Right.
Yes. So I've got a couple, I'm going to ask a couple of specific questions about some of the projects you worked on, because they're personal favorites of mine and they're super interesting to me. I see that you worked on House.
Yeah.
I'm curious. House is one of the first horror films I fell in love with and grew up loving that film. And I still do. I still think it's a really underrated horror film. What did you do on that film? How'd you get involved?
Well, a friend of mine wrote it. Ethan Wiley was the co-writer of it. And he and I had worked on Jedi and Gremlins together up in Marin County. He was from Marin County, and he was a script writer from UCLA. I knew him from UCLA. Actually, you know what? We've gone to UCLA together and we hadn't met, but we met on Jedi and then worked together on Gremlins. And he had written the script, and he suggested to the producer that because he knew I was a creature designer, that I come in. So I designed I designed all the characters, and they used most of my designs. The guy who actually ran the creature shop, because I didn't build anything, I just did drawings. But Big Ben and the doorway beast with all the heads and mouths and everything, those two didn't really change that much. And I think the witch was pretty close to what I've done. Jim Cummings, I think, ran the shop. And then a bunch of friends of mine who I met on that show, went on to become friends, good friends, whatever it was, almost 40 years now, 35 years. So yeah, I was a designer on it. A big band, they pretty much took my drawing and built it. I mean, and he was just based on the old EC, Jack Davis, horror comics, but they didn't really change that much from bullet hole in his helmet to, I don't have the original drawing. I think the producer has it, but yeah, that's what I worked on House, is designing creatures for it.
Well, the creatures are so freaking memorable in that film, especially Big Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a deep cut there. Not a lot of people know it, because creature designer. I don't even think I got credit. I mean, I know I have credit as something, but I don't know if it's creature designer or just creature crew.
I also saw that you did some uncredited work on Poltergeist and Et.
Yeah, that's because I was at ILM and I ran the creature paint shop and set it up. And so in Poltergeist, I think I just molded and cast some stuff working with Craig Reardon, who actually was the first person I ever spoke to when I was like 14. He had written an article for Cinemagic or Cinefex magazine, which was a hobbyist version of the special effects magazine. And it was all these guys from all over the country showing how they made their masks or their stop motion puppets. And Craig did a couple articles. And this is back in the day when it said he lived in LA. So I went to the phone book, looked up Craig Reardon and said, hey, I saw your article. And he was such a lovely guy. And I met him and he showed, taught me some. Mainly we talked on the phone, but he was nice and helpful. And he told me I should go visit John Chambers, which I did at his house in Burbank, called him up and he, gave me some magazines and told me what was a good mold material or something and where to get my alginate. And then, so whatever, 4 years later, I'm at ILM and Craig comes up to work on Poltergeist. I'm like, hey, you were super nice and helped me out. So we became friendlier because we were in the same space and working the same thing. So I helped him a little bit with molding or casting. Nothing, I didn't do any design. And then on ET, I painted a bunch of spare ET hands and arms, again, through Craig Reardon. I was at ILM and Craig for Carlo. And Carlo, I guess he had a disagreement. I'm not sure exactly what, but I can imagine Carlo was tough to work with or for. And so Craig said, I'm out. So they got a call at ILM. We need someone to come down and paint some more skins because the guy who's been doing it, which was Craig, has left the project. So I flew down to LA and painted ET skins, mainly arms and hands, at my parents' house in Van Nuys. And then when we had the little model for the bicycle shots, I helped paint that. It was just a little tiny ET. I think we made it a Sculpey or something because it was just the little blanket over his head for the shots of them riding across the sky.
I'm curious.
So, not a lot on those films.
Out of all the creatures you designed, which is the one that resonates the most with you?
That I'm most happiest with the way it came out. I think the top two would be the baby from Dinosaurs because they didn't really screw that much, and then Sinclair, or the boss, BP Richfield, because they pretty much took my drawing and made it, and there were great sculptors at the creature shop in London who just got it. It was tougher with the females, Fran and the daughter Charlene were tougher because they had to be feminine. And originally, my original drawings, they had hair. And I remember Brian Henson saying, like, they can't have hair. They dinosaurs. It's ridiculous. It's a talking dinosaur family. But I said, okay. So we gave them frills and fans. And, well, it was a defensible argument. And I wasn't going to really argue with them. But
I don't know.
The original drawings they had.
I feel like I would have argued with them saying that we're doing talking dinosaurs. I think if we want them to have hair, we can make them have hair. They're talking fucking dinosaurs.
Well, over time, it was probably fine. They tended to look like My Little Ponies because, and it was weird. But I embrace, I don't know if you've noticed, but I embrace weird. But the females probably had the biggest change. Robbie, pretty accurate to what I drew. He kind of had that horsey face with the spiky mohawk. But I think Richfield and the baby were my most the ones I was happiest with. And then Christine McConnell is pretty happy with Rankle and Rose. Because we did those for $1. I mean, that was such a fast, low budget show. And I mean, Rankle's an actual cat, because he was working with humans. We couldn't have this big creature. He's the size of an actual mummified cat, and cat bones are like fish bones. They're tiny. So his head's, this big. I mean, it's the size of a tennis ball. And we had, 6 motors in there, or cables, I should say, for his eyes and his eye blinks and his mouth. So his eyes, eyebrows, each eyebrow and his mouth. And they're all running through a neck the size of how big is that around? Like an 1.5-inch dowel. I mean, just this tiny, skinny neck. And it was all worked by 2 puppeteers. One was working the mouth. Another guy was working, I think, the mouth and the head. And the other guy was working the tail and and puppeteering the paws. And Rose, the raccoon. Edgar was tough because he was just a big, hairy. We had different designs. Christine ultimately wanted a werewolf. And I said, well, why didn't you say it in the beginning? Because originally she's like, I wanted to be super scary and terrifying. And, I'm like, okay. So I was designing these horrifying creatures. And she's like, no, it's too ugly. It's too gross. I'm like, well, you said, and then we talked about him wearing a bag over his head like the Elephant Man. Like he was so terrifying. Like, one idea I threw out, which is a character I've always wanted to do, where his mother was a harpy or a Medusa. So like, if you see him, you turn to stone. So he's got a bag over his head like the Elephant Man. He's got claws or something. And ultimately she just said, I just wanted to look like, she kept referring to this werewolf. I think it was the werewolf from The Howling. And she's like, yeah. I just want that. And I said, okay. I mean, look, it's your show. I'm happy to accommodate, but that's been done a lot. But it worked. And because, and not the original, but what I pivoted on was, okay, if that's what he's going to look like, I'm going to make him writing wise, which is what most of my work was. I did the design and kind of the creature shop and a designer, a great guy named Neil, to do the renderings, and then I would just supervise the build.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we lost Dave, but that's okay. I think he had a 2:00 meeting, so I'm going to keep chugging.
Okay.
I'm curious. There's just so many.
You froze.
What'd you say?
Yeah. Oh, you were frozen for a second, so I thought, we're losing everybody.
I think everybody's internet's a little choppy today. That's just the world we live in now with Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm interested. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about this, because one of my close friends and who does you're familiar with Screen Drafts, the podcast.
Yes, I've heard it like once. I don't listen to a lot. I'm familiar with it.
Well, Clay Keller, who runs that podcast, who's a friend of mine, is an enormous Star Trek fan. And so I would be remiss if I didn't ask about your pivotal role as Punk on Bus in The Voyage Home.
Yeah. That's why I grew the beard. I was so sick of being recognized for it. No, I'm kidding. Well, what's his question? How did I get it, or what was it like? Or
yeah, I'm curious how that came about in general, and how that led to you being eventually Punk on Street in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Well, it's 3 stories, but I'll try and compress them. So I was working as Leonard's assistant in the beginning on Star Trek 4. I got hired. After I left ILM and Gremlins, I went back to UCLA to study computer graphics, because I realized this is going to take over the effects industry. So I went to UCLA Animation Workshop, and I was there for 2 semesters, maybe summer and fall. And during the fall quarter, near the end of the fall quarter, somebody came by, and they were a headhunter for Paramount for Star Trek 4. Now, I'd worked on Star Trek 3 at ILM, actually puppeteered and helped cast the Klingon dog, the dog lizard. I forget what the Star Trek fans call it. It's got a name, but it was Korg's pet lizard by his chair in the Klingon ship. And then I puppeteered, there's actually a picture of me in Cinefex with short hair looking like I'm 12 years old in a Tyvek suit, puppeteering we just call them the slime worms that Krug finds in Spock's, near Spock's coffin, which the Genesis effect had turned them from little bacteria into giant, like cobra-y bacteria worms. So there's a picture of me with Christopher Lloyd, and I'm kind of behind him with my arm up in this thing. And in a Tyvek suit because Methacel was just dripping all over us. So anyway, they were looking for someone to be Leonard's assistant who had an effects background, and I was kind of tailor-made for the job. I mean, I'd worked at ILM 9 months earlier. I just left, and I had worked on Star Trek 3 and 4. Actually, I helped make the slime worms with the earworms, for Star Trek 2 with Dave Sasala, and again the worms and the dog on 3. So I met with Leonard and we hit it off, and he said, I'd like to, again, I'm compressing, but he said, I want to hire you as my assistant. I said, sure, I'd love that. So I left UCLA, started working at Paramount every day with Leonard, and about right before we started filming, he said, I want to make you a director, but there's no such title and the DGA won't let me, so I'm going to make you associate producer. So I became associate producer, and scene in the movie with this punk on the bus, and I went into his office one day. I said, hey, I was in a punk band. I had a punk haircut, and my hair was dyed orange, and I had kind of a short mohawk. I want to play the punk. And he was like, what? And I said, yeah, I want to do that. And I did a sketch, which I still have. I found it in my own portfolios. I did a drawing of what I would look like, and I showed it to him. And he went, all right, let me think about it. And he thought about it for a week, and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to bother him. And he, at the end of the day, he would have a nice gin and tonic, and we'd sit and shoot the breeze and just talk about work and talk about life. And so maybe about a week later, we'd done our end of the day wrap up, and I was about to leave, and I was literally kind of still remember this moment, like kind of walking out the door, and it's like a movie moment. He said, oh, by the way, yeah. I said, yeah, one more thing, I said, yeah. He said, you can do it. And I'm like, wait, what? Wait, seriously? So I was super excited. So I went to my friend who had done my hair when she was a hairdresser, and you would razor your hair and bleach it. And so bleached my hair twice, dyed it road cone orange, got the whole outfit, got the earrings and the swastikas and whatever, the leather jacket. I just went to Melrose back in the day where you could get all this punk stuff, put together the outfit, and showed Leonard. And actually Rick Baker's wife was the hairstylist on that. And so she helped me Aquanet my hair up into a mohawk and paint the roots black and the tips black. So it looked so we shot it. And then when we were shooting it, I was just going like this, just trying to keep a beat in my head. There was no music. There was not a click track or anything. It was just trying to be a jerk. And because, they added it in post. And so when we were in post-production and they'd cut the scene together, they wanted some track to use. And, they said, well, Paramount has a deal with something like Duran Duran or something. And I was like, no. And Leonard knew punk. I was like 20. And I said, no, you need like the Dead Kennedys, or because I remember talking to the music editor, Dead Kennedys or Sex Pistols. And he said, no, Paramount's not a good deal with those guys. So I said to Leonard, again, we had this level of trust. I said, I'll write you a song that should, sound like sound like a Dead Kennedys or Toy Dolls or Sex Pistols or Ramones. And, it'll work with the scene because I can kind of, and if you don't like it, don't use it. It won't cost you anything. But if it does, great. It's a win-win. Jeannie was our sound editor and designer. He and I had become good friends on Gremlins, and he was doing Star Trek 4. I told Leonard I do this song. I can't play guitar, but I wrote these lyrics out, and I have this rhythm in my head. It's like da 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 da, really aggressive machine gun. And Mark wrote like a 4-chord punk slam, and we recorded it in his hallway with a crappy queuing mic, so it sounded like garage band punk, which is what that character would listen to. He wouldn't be listening to, it was on a boom box on a cassette. Yeah. So I remember Leonard came in, I think it was a Saturday. For some reason, I remember it being a Saturday, and to listen mainly to the whale sounds that Alan Howarth and Mark had been making for the alien whale sounds for, that the call and response would happen at the end of the movie. And so we queued up the song we had done. We recorded, I think, on Friday afternoon, or maybe even that morning, and queued it up to the scene and put a pair of headphones on and let him watch it and listen to it. And I remember him watching, going, kind of half smirking, and scene was over. He took the headphones off and he looked at me. He said, "Oh, it's terrible." I was like, "Oh, well, he goes, so it's perfect." He knew how to take the moment. He was an amazing actor. very funny. So yeah, that's how it got in the movie. And so we had to come up with a band name. So I had been nicknamed by the producer, the line producer, Ralph Winter, because I would go to meetings as Leonard's, as the king's messenger, sort of. And when Leonard just didn't want to go, didn't really care, trusted my taste, just said, make sure it doesn't look stupid or something. So I would make jokes because I'm me and I don't have much of a filter. And so Ralph had nicknamed me the Edge of Etiquette. He goes, man, you just walk the edge of etiquette. And I was like, that should be the name of the punk band. So that's why in the credits it says the song I Hate You by the Edge of Etiquette, written by Kirk Thatcher. So the Edge of Etiquette is myself, Mark Mangini, Aaron Glasscock, and John Pospisil on drums and rhythm guitar, bass guitar. So it was just really guitar, bass, drums, and a vocalist. And they were all the sound guys. John P. and I are still, I'm friends with all three of them. John P. moved to New York to take care of his mom, but he did some sound effects for me on Turkey Hollow, a Henson project I did, the Thanksgiving movie 5 years ago. And we needed these weird creature sounds. And he's just an amazing audio designer. So yeah, so that's how I Hate You came about. And another trivia thing that I've just been mentioning, and I just put it out on the May the 4th be with you day on May 4th. So I wrote a bunch of tech dialogue for the movie because Harv Bennett's like, I don't write this stuff. You have a head for it. You're a sci-fi nerd. So one of the things I wrote and then ultimately recorded, and I don't get credit for, is the opening scene where Spock is with the 5 computers and all those questions are being thrown at him. Who said logic is metaphysics relations, which is some chaos using your guide, correct? T. Planahoth, matron of Vulcan philosophy. It's like, correct. So that was me. I wrote all those, I wrote up like 20 questions and they think they used 6 or 7. And Leonard and Harv both said, just have it range from science to philosophy to, basically to prove or to show that Spock has sort of grasped, facts. He's sort of an encyclopedia again. But again, when it says, how do you feel? How do you feel? Like that throws him. The one thing he can't relate to is, I don't know about feelings. So I wrote and recorded those. And originally it was a scratch track. It was just going to be used. So Leonard had something to play off of for timing. It was just, we used it with the screen projections. And so we'd have some ping and then something to cut to. And the end of the movie, they said, when we were in post-production, Leonard just said, just use that, it's fine. So they tweaked it a little bit. It made it sound more robotic. When it came time to credits, they came to me, they said, look, you got your SAG card from the song, actually not from the bit on camera, but from writing and singing the song, or from singing the song. But we're not going to give you credit for the computer voice because your name would be in the credits 4 times more than anybody else. You'd be associate producer, punk on bus, songwriter of I Hate You, and voice of the computer. So we're not gonna give you that. I said, I'm fine with 3 credits. So yeah. So and the Easter egg I put in there was T. Plana Hoth is the matron of Vulcan philosophy. Well, to Plana Hoth is planet Hoth with just the T put in front of planet.
Yeah.
If you take the T at the end of planet, it becomes to Plana Hoth, which to me sounded very Vulcan. And also was like, because I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, I'm like, I put a Star Wars Easter egg in a Star Trek movie. And to my knowledge, nobody ever caught it. Although when I announced it on this May 4th, 2020, 3 or 4 diehard fans sent me private emails, said, well, I knew that. I recognized it. I saw it immediately, or I heard it immediately. I'm like, well, you didn't say anything. So, anyway. That was, and a lot of people were like, are you kidding me? It was right in front of us. I mean, it's even spelled out. Although I'm told, because I never followed Trek trivia or canon, but they've been spelling it T Plana Hath, H-A-T-H, which is not how I spelled it. And they might have spelled it that way in the text. But again, for me, if it's pronounced Hoth, it's Planet Hoth. Plana Hoth, Planet Hoth, yeah. So you can spell it whatever you want. People are like, but it's spelled with an A. I'm like, well, you can spell it with an H-A-W too. I don't care. It's pronounced Hoth. T Plana Hoth. So that's a big trivia thing, and that was fun. So I know this is surprising, but it turns out I'm a bit of a nerd.
I'm shocked.
I know. Everyone's like, you sexy Playboy male model world traveling crime solver.
How do you go from punk on bus to punk on street in a Spider-Man movie?
That's all Kevin Feige. He's a huge Star Wars fan and Star Trek fan. And when I met him, I thought I was being punked because, you know, I knew he was. I mean, I think Avengers 2 had just come out. It was at Comic-Con like 5 years ago. And I met him and he said, wait, my friend, it was Michael Giacchino, the composer who's working with them, I think, on Spider-Man 1. No, well, obviously it wasn't Spider-Man 1. It was, maybe they were talking about him working on Spider-Man 1. But anyway, he said, this is my friend Kirk Thatcher. And Kevin Feige went, wait, the Kirk Thatcher? I laugh now because I was like, yeah. Wait, he goes, wait, from Star Trek 4, The Punk in the Bus? And I'm like, yeah. And he like very sincerely shook my hand and said, it's an honor to meet you. You're the reason I got in the film business. I'm like, wait, I keep looking at Michael's off to the side, which is why I keep looking at that. I'm like, wait, seriously? He said, yeah, I saw that movie at 15. And I said, I want to be a producer, man. He got to play the punk, write the song, you know, be the associate producer. So, you know, we've been friendly since then. I tried to get a gig writing or directing a Marvel movie. I go, well, you keep hiring guys who've done $1 million films. I've done 3 franchise movies for you know, under $10 million. So we're talking. I don't know. It's a long process. But that's how. So they were making Star Trek. They're making Spider-Man: Homecoming, and I was in a meeting with Marvel about this project I was working on, a script I was developing with them or for them. I was developing a pitch, essentially. So it was an unpaid gig at this point. It was like, hey, here's a property we own. If you can come up with a pitch, you know, we'd love to hear it and develop with you. So I was in that meeting. Kevin was running late. He kind of ran in and said, I'm sorry, I'm late. I had a car accident. Everything's fine. I've got to run off. I'm leaving for New York tomorrow. This was like a Wednesday. And I said, I'm leaving. I'm going to be in New York on Friday. He goes, wait, when are you going? I said, Friday morning. He said, we should put you in the movie. I'm like, what? He said, yeah, we're wrapping the last scenes of Spider-Man Homecoming, and we're shooting in New York and Queens. We'll put you out as a punk on the street. And I said, what? He's like, yeah, you can be the punk like 30 years later. I'm like, oh, okay. He said, can you be there Friday? I'm like, yeah, I have a flight. Well, it turns out they were shooting the scene at like 6 a.m. So I had to change my flight to a red eye. So I flew Thursday night. I brought my own. I said, okay, I'm just going to play it. I talked to the producer so that was a Wednesday. Thursday, he said, yep, we got you a flight. We got you a hotel room. And it was just a quick turnaround. It was basically fly in, do the scene, sleep over, and leave the next day. I said, okay. And I talked to, I think, someone on the writing team or someone in production. It was a producer, I guess, and said, yeah, I'll play him as a homeless guy because, you know, 30 years later, he's kind of crazy. They said, do you have the boombox? I said, I don't. That was Paramount prop department. I didn't get that. Okay, we'll get you a boombox. I said, great. I can dress like this. Is my beard. My hair was down to here. I had the big full beard. I'm like, I look like a homeless guy, so it works. So that's how I got stuck in the movie. They put me in the scene with the guy flipping burgers at the cart, and they played. I mean, the guy was really sweet because they were giving me some of his lines and just letting us both say, hey, you're Spider-Man, do a trick, you know, and he got to say it. And luckily they kept it with him because I just was a last minute addition. But so that's how I ended up. But Kevin said, it's a scene that wouldn't normally even get me a credit. But because Kevin was such a Trek fan, he made it punk on the street, and I had the boombox. And originally, I Hate You was supposed to be playing. My song was supposed to be playing, and Disney didn't want to pay for it.
Wow.
So, thanks, Disney. That would have helped me out during this lockdown.
Yeah, it sure would have. I have a couple final questions for you that are from our Patreon subscribers. They had a couple of specific questions that they wanted me to ask. They're very generic questions, but I'm interested to know what the answers are. Right. The first one is, sure. Who is your favorite Muppet?
Oh, you totally froze. Yeah, you had the first question is,
am I unfrozen now?
You keep freezing in and out. You can.
We're having just wonderful internet issues today. These are glorious.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Now you're fine.
Okay, now I'm fine. Okay. Thank you, internet gods. So question 1 was, who is your favorite Muppet?
Oh, geez, everyone asked me that one. Okay, so before I started working with them, it was Gonzo.
Uh-huh.
because I liked how crazy he was. And after I started working with him, it was a character I helped develop. So I'm prejudiced or biased. It's Pepe, the prawn.
Oh yeah.
Because I always thought we needed our Daffy Duck. We needed kind of the selfish little jerk. And Rizzo was to a degree. And when I was writing stuff for him, we made him, a bit of a wheeler dealer. But Pepe is just unapologetically a jerk. And I just thought the Muppets had gotten so sweet and charming and insecure that like they were all just like, oh, let's a bunch of nice people go do something. And then so I said, can't we have someone within the group? And then Bill Beretta made this amazing character. I mean, I think, yeah, Gonzo pre-me, Pepe after me.
The other question is a little more inside baseball. So you worked on Gremlins, and Gremlins famously has an original script that is insanely darker than the movie that we see on screen. We actually did it at the Scripts Gone Wild and read that original script, and there was just a horror.
Oh wow!
It was a horrifying sequence.
It was a horror movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the question were you involved? What can you tell us about that original script? And were you involved at all when it was still going in that direction, or did it come on later?
No. I mean, Chris Wallace might have read it. I never did. They didn't. Script lockdowns were pretty. We never got script pages until like the day we were shooting to see. I mean, Chris did, but as crew, we didn't.
Yeah.
So I had no involvement with the writing. I'd heard that it had originally been a horror movie, like a dark, like a comedic horror movie, but a horror movie first. And I think I was told it was Spielberg's influence to make it more, to make the Mogwais cuter and make it have kind of a sweetness to it. But I was told I should hear the script read you guys did. I didn't hear that. But the scene with Phoebe Cates talking about her dad and getting stuck in the chimney and all that was more the tone of the original. So that got left in. But yeah, it was, they were evil, but we kind of played it more for laughs. And then Gremlins 2 is a complete, knockdown goofball comedy.
Yeah, that original script has a sequence where they go into this restaurant and there's like these dead families everywhere, like the parents and the kids are like sitting at the table, and it's just creepy and unsettling.
Face down in the spaghetti. Yeah, I'd heard that. I'd never read it. Again, most of those movies back then, Jedi, E.T. E.T. wasn't even called E.T. It was called The Boy's Life when I worked on it.
Wow.
I think I have a crew jacket that says A Boy's Life or something. It's probably worth a lot of money. It's like Blue Harvest, everything. Script pages were given out only to key members, and as crew, you didn't know what you were doing until your boss or the director told you.
So I've got one last question for you, and out of all the projects you've worked on, what's the project that you wish more people knew about, or that you wish people would rediscover or discover more?
You mean make more episodes of, or just
just a project that you've worked on that you wish people would or that people would come around to more, that they maybe don't know about, or it maybe wasn't as popular when it came out.
That's like everything I work on. Well, Christine McConnell, I really liked that show, and we had such big plans for the second season. And that's not really fans, that's Netflix. I think because it was this weird hybrid, and even Netflix was like, we don't know what this is. It's not really a cooking show, and it's not really a comedy. I'm like, yeah, it's both. It's still prevalent in Hollywood, marketing people drive everything. Like, we don't know how to market this. It's like, how did you market the Addams Family? I mean, it's the Addams Family where Morticia basically explains how to make stuff, but nobody makes those things anyway. Yeah. So, and Christine was amazing, and she and I talked about season 2, and we were hoping, that and what was sad to me is we got like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
And like 98% from critics. Like, it was successful. Yeah. But I think with Netflix, we were successful with 2 million people, not 60 million people. So, but the budget we did it for was so low. I mean, it was literally like a kids show budget on PBS. It was shockingly low for what they got. So that disheartened. And we still get fans. I mean, I still get fan mail and people, finding the show now. It's a very niche market, I guess, and that's probably the issue, is that it's a niche market. But I think Turkey Hollow it's a fun little film. It wasn't what I wanted it to be because we did it with Lifetime, and so they kind of cut the comedy out of it. It was supposed to be funnier, more like a Disney, Gremlins, but they're not evil, but just more fun. And they just would cut even subtle comedy and relationship. I didn't Lifetime. I wasn't super happy with their taste. They were lovely people to work with, but they just didn't want it to be as funny as I thought it should be because it's an absurd concept. So I don't know, but I guess Christine McConnell's the one I wish got more love by a broader, mainly so it would have been brought back because, the good news is Christine just did her own Patreon. Yeah. And I think she has like 11,000 followers or something. She's making more money than she ever made on her show. And she shoots it herself at her house with her husband. He shoots it and does the music. So, she's getting all that money instead of getting a tiny percentage from a show she created. So that's great. It has a happy ending. Except for me. So I'm just busy now trying to create my own shows and sell them. I've been pitching, and it's tough, that I find is original ideas are only good if you've had a hit TV show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're a showrunner and you ran, a Dharma and Greg, or you ran a Big Bang Theory, or you ran whatever, The Office, then they'll listen to your crazy idea. But if you're a guy who did Christine McConnell and Muppets, they're like, and even the Muppets have been not super successful.
Yeah.
And I don't know, look, your audience, people who love Gremlins and Muppets and things like that, we're a small niche market, I guess. Gremlins was a big movie, but, could you sell it as a TV series? I've been trying to sell things along the lines of Bewitched or, I Dream of Jeannie, kind of comedies with an absurd premise with magic or creatures. And they just stare at you like you've got two heads. And I thought because of the success of Christine McConnell, at least with that audience, that I would get, and I get meetings and people nod and smile and say, that's interesting. And then I always typify it where they say, oh, we have a talking dog show. I'm like, this has a werewolf and a mummified cat. And, she's creepy and has an axe murderer boyfriend that, is trying to kill her, or a cousin who's trying to kill her. And they're like, yeah, we're looking for some, they always, if they have anything odd. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a series where I think it was an imaginary friend, and it was voiced by Rachel Dratch, I believe. And it lasted like 6 episodes, but that killed anything I was pitching that year. Oh, somebody's doing an imaginary friend. So it's like, it's not imaginary. It's aliens from space living with whatever. So it's tough. It's tough to sell I would just say that it's tough to sell original ideas unless you are and that's human nature. I don't take it personally. It's like if you have a hit TV series, then you can sell a more original idea. But I'm still plugging away. I've been thinking about doing Patreon, but if any of your Patreon members have ideas of what I would do, besides, there's only so many stories I can tell.
Yeah.
I've wanted to do like a sketch comedy thing. And I've asked people on my Facebook page. I've got almost 5,000, friends and followers. And the problem is I ask, 100 people answer, I get 100 different answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some want like a creature shop challenge. Show us how to make creatures. Some say do sketch comedy. Others talk about the Muppets, and maybe I just do a catch-all that's a little bit of everything. But
I can't imagine.
If you have any bright ideas.
I can't imagine you wouldn't have good success just talking about creature design for people on there. I feel like that would be something people would be super into.
Well, I've started doing consulting because, it's so like me talking about creature design, it's a huge field. It's like me talking about comedy. So I've started a consulting business online where you just go to, if you don't mind me doing a plug,
plug away.
It's www.kirkrthatcher.com, all one word, all lowercase, just kirkrthatcher.com. And you can book a half hour to an hour consulting session, or I'll read your script. If it's under 60 pages, if it's a TV kind of size thing, it's a certain amount. And if it's a feature, it's like $300-400, but because it requires 2 hours of my time and then an hour of us together giving you notes. I won't rewrite it, but I'll give you what I'm really trying to do is bring back what Jim Henson did. Was not say, here's what you need to fix, but creatively brainstorm with someone, because that is something I've had experience with with George Lucas and Leonard Nimoy and Jim Henson and Brian Henson and, you know, Joe Dante and Chris Wallace and people like that. And I know that process. In fact, that's what Jim originally hired me for, was to do these brainstormings. And I find even on my own, like brainstorming by yourself is really hard.
Yeah.
So for a pretty nominal fee, I think it's $80 for half an hour and $130 for an hour, I will go over with you whatever you want. It could be talk about, you know, what you want to do for Christmas to, you know, this creature. Like I've helped 2 people so far. Someone gave me a TV pitch, and I went over with them and, you know, not only found things like spelling errors, but also logic problems with the stories. And that I didn't pre-read. That was just in the half hour. So if you don't want to pay the extra money, we can spend part of the time with me reading whatever you have. If it's script, it won't work. But if it's like, he had like a 6-page document, which, and I went over, and now he's booked a second session to go over what the changes we made, because I've sold 4 TV series in my life. And that's something. And again, I haven't sold a series about, it's a mom and a dad, and the dad is a brunette, but the mom's a blonde. I mean, they're weird shows. So if you're coming to me with, you know, Where's My Hat, we used to call it, which is, you know, the TGIF Friday shows, I'm probably not your guy. But if you have anything out of the ordinary with creatures or comedy that's skewed or sci-fi or fantasy, you know, I know what to do and kind of what not to do, or what they look for or what they're not looking for. I can't tell you that, you know, half an hour with me is going to make your show a guaranteed sale, but I can provide a sounding board from someone who's been there, especially on pitches, how to tailor your pitch so that you stay away from pitfalls.
Yeah.
And also I'm selling autographed pictures and original art. If people are interested, I do drawings of dinosaur characters, or I'm working on one for the production designer, Christine McConnell, where I've got all 3 creatures from Christine McConnell surrounding her and like adoring her. And I thought, well, that's good. I'm going to do it without her, and then sell, you know, if you want a picture of you, because women particularly love that show. So if you want an original drawing of you with the 3 creatures, you know, it's a few $100, but considering the amount of work that goes into it.
For sure.
So yeah, so I'm doing that, especially during the lockdown when we're not making anything.
There's not much else to do except find creative ways to stay busy.
Yeah. So again, www.kirkarthatcher.com.
Hell yeah.
It's the first time I've ever sold myself. So I'm doing that. And that can be, again, very specific. Like you said, talk about creature design. I will talk about your creature design, not in general, and look at designs and happy to go over what did and didn't work. One gal wanted to do a specific kind of creature, and I gave her a lot of input considering what she wanted to do. I said, well, you don't have, she wanted to maybe build a big suit. And I said, well, if it doesn't interact with people, you can do it like a rod puppet and save a ton of time and money and just shoot it green screen, which is, you know, you can do on your phone now. Effects and things are so much easier compositing than it used to be. So just stuff like that, advice on physical effects too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's awesome. So I'm going to plug the website one more time, kirkarthatcher.com.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us for a happy hour, sir.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Well, and bring me in on another Scripts Gone Wild. I love doing voices.
Me and Dave were just talking. We were like, how has Kirk not done another read with us? So we've got, I'll email
It's Frank Dietz. He hates me.
It's Frank Dietz.
It's Dietz, man. He hates me. I'm just so pretty.
I will shoot you an email, though. We've got some in July that you'd be great in.
Great. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of voiceover stuff for friends.
Yeah. So this is just to our patrons out there. So like and subscribe to this video like you do on the YouTube. Please visit us on Patreon, patreon.com/scriptsgonewild and scriptsgonewild.com. And again, thank you, sir. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. It's my Sean Connery. Cheers. All right. Take care.